You don't mind, do you? I've been missing care so much lately.
The smell of cheap wine and academic desperation hung thick in the air as I watched my wife Lila lean over her coworker's shoulder, her hand lingering just a little too long on his arm. "Eric's practically my work husband," she giggled, shooting me a look that dared me to say something. "I'm Max Bishop, and after 15 years of marriage, I know when my wife is full of crap." "Ha, hilarious," I muttered, taking another swig of the watery beer they'd provided for us non-faculty spouses. Next, she'll be calling him daddy in front of the dean, Eric Harrow, golden boy professor with his perfectly styled hair and that smug smile that made me want to rearrange his face, gave me a knowing smirk. The kind of look that said he knew something I didn't, the kind that made my fists clench involuntarily. "Just a joke, Max," Lila said, but her voice had that sharp edge it got when she was lying. After all these years fixing computers and dealing with people's bullcrap for a living, I'd developed a pretty good radar for deception. The university's holiday party was in full swing around us. Faculty members clustered in their little groups, discussing tenure and research grants while their spouses stood around looking as out of place as I felt. The whole scene reeked of pretension and barely concealed office politics. I excused myself to hit the bathroom, but as I walked down the hallway, a voice stopped me. "Max, you got a minute?" I turned to see Maya, Lila's secretary. She was a quiet woman in her 40s, the kind who saw everything but said nothing. Until now, apparently. "Sure, Maya, what's up?" She glanced around nervously, then motioned for me to follow her. "You really want to know what's going on with your wife and Professor Harrow?" My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. "What do you mean? Come on, let me show you something." Maya led me through a maze of corridors to the staff locker room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. She stopped in front of a locker marked L. Bishop and pulled out a key. "I clean these lockers every week," she said quietly. "Found this key taped under her desk last month. Been wondering when someone would ask the right questions." The locker door swung open and my world tilted sideways. Inside, tucked behind a stack of papers, was a collection that told the whole sordid story. Handwritten notes from Eric, each one more explicit than the last. A cheap silver necklace that definitely wasn't from me. An open box of rubbers, the expensive kind, because apparently my wife had standards when it came to cheating. And there, clipped to the inside of the door, a key card for the Sunset Motel on Route 9. "Jesus," I whispered, pulling out my phone to snap photos. My hands were surprisingly steady for a man whose marriage had just imploded in a staff locker room. Maya watched me document everything. She's been different lately. Secretive. Always on her phone, staying late for meetings that weren't on her calendar. I finished photographing the evidence and carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Well, almost everything. I pulled out my wallet and removed our wedding photo, the one I carried like an idiot, and wrote "cheater" across Lila's face in red ink from a marker on the nearby whiteboard. I left it propped up in the locker along with a note. "Hope it was worth it. Your loving husband." "Thanks, Maya," I said, closing the locker door. "I owe you one." She shook her head. "Just treat that boy of yours right. Ben's a good kid. He doesn't deserve to see his parents tear each other apart." I made it back to the party just as Lila was looking around for me. She was still standing close to Eric, their heads bent together in conversation. When she saw me, she straightened up with that fake smile she'd perfected over the years. "There you are! Eric was just telling me about his research project. Fascinating stuff." "I bet it is," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Real hands-on work, I imagine." Eric's smirk widened. "Oh, very hands-on. Lila's been incredibly helpful with my research." The double meaning wasn't lost on any of us. I wanted to grab him by his perfectly pressed shirt and introduce his face to the nearest wall. Instead, I smiled back. "Well, honey," I said to Lila, "we should probably head home. Early day tomorrow." The drive home was tense. Lila kept glancing at me, trying to read my mood. I kept my eyes on the road and my mouth shut. No point in tipping my hand until I was ready to play it. "You were quiet tonight," she said as we pulled into our driveway. "Just tired. Long week." "Eric thinks you don't like him." I turned off the engine and looked at her. Really looked at her. When had she started wearing makeup to work every day? When had she started caring so much about her appearance for a job she used to complain about constantly? "Eric's probably right," I said. "Good night, Lila." The next morning, I was in my garage workshop by 6 a.m., trying to lose myself in the familiar routine of fixing things. Unlike marriages, computers were logical. They followed rules. When they broke, there was usually a clear cause and a clear solution. My 17-year-old son Ben found me there an hour later, hunched over a laptop that belonged to one of my regular clients. "Dad, you okay? Mom said you were acting weird last night." Ben was a good kid. Smart, loyal, with his mother's dark eyes, but thankfully, my skeptical nature. He'd inherited my knack for technology, too, though his skills had already surpassed mine in some areas. "Define weird," I said, not looking up from the screen. "She said you were being antisocial at her work party. More than usual, I mean." I set down my screwdriver and really looked at my son. He was old enough to handle the truth, or at least part of it. And if things were about to get ugly, which they were, he deserved to know why. "Ben, sit down. We need to talk." I told him about finding the evidence in Lila's locker. I kept the details clinical, matter of fact. Ben listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "That's messed up," he said when I finished. "What are you going to do?" "I'm still figuring that out, but I need to know more first. Think you could help me with something?" Ben's eyes lit up with the same gleam I got when faced with a particularly challenging technical problem. "What kind of help?" "The kind that requires your particular skill set, and the kind we don't tell your mother about." 20 minutes later, Ben had cloned Lila's phone using a technique he'd learned from some YouTube video. The kid was scary good with technology when he put his mind to it. "Got it," he said, handing me a tablet displaying Lila's text messages. "Everything's here. Calls, texts, photos, the works." What I found made my stomach turn. Months of messages between Lila and Eric, starting innocent enough but quickly escalating into explicit territory. Plans for afternoon meetups, complaints about me, how boring I was, how she deserved better, how Eric made her feel alive again. But it was the most recent thread that really got my attention. Eric, "When are you going to tell him?" Lila, "Soon, I'm just waiting for the right moment." Eric, "We could make this easier, get him to leave on his own." Lila, "How?" Eric, "I have some ideas. Trust me." "Dad?" Ben was watching my face. "You look like you want to hit something." "I do," I admitted, "but that won't solve anything. We need to be smarter than that." My phone rang. It was my sister Danny calling from the Rusty Key, the dive bar she'd been managing for the past 5 years. Danny had always been the street-smart one in the family, with an ear for gossip and a talent for reading people. "Max, you need to get down here," she said without preamble. "There's something you should see." "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of—" "It's about Lila and that professor she's been screwing." I was there in 15 minutes. The Rusty Key was the kind of place where locals went to drink away their problems and share their secrets. Danny had cultivated an atmosphere where people felt comfortable talking, and as a result, she knew everyone's business in town. She led me to the back room where a few security cameras covered the main seating area. "Check this out," she said, pulling up footage from the previous Thursday. "Around 9 p.m. The grainy video showed Lila and Eric in a corner booth, drinks in front of them, hands all over each other. They looked like teenagers, completely oblivious to anyone watching. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "This is the third time I've seen them here. Always the same routine. They come in separately, sit in that booth, act like they're discussing work if anyone gets too close." I watched my wife of 15 years run her fingers through another man's hair, saw her laugh at whatever he was whispering in her ear. The rage that had been building since last night crystallized into something colder, more focused. "Danny, I need a favor." "Name it." "I need you to spread some gossip." My sister's grin was sharp as a blade. "Now you're talking my language." That afternoon, while Lila was at work, I paid a visit to Eric's apartment complex downtown. He lived in one of those trendy lofts that cost more than most people made in a year, the kind of place that screamed, "Look how successful I am," to anyone within earshot. His car was parked in the designated faculty spot, a silver BMW that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. The vanity plate read, "Profi, real subtle." I'd brought my toolbox. 20 minutes later, Eric's BMW was sitting on 4 flat tires, its exhaust pipe stuffed with expanding foam, and "Home Wrecker" written in mud across the windshield. Nothing permanent, nothing that couldn't be fixed, but expensive and embarrassing enough to make a point. I was back home by the time Lila returned from work. She walked into the kitchen looking shaken, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly as she poured herself a glass of wine. "Rough day?" I asked, not looking up from the newspaper I was pretending to read. Someone broke into my locker at work, she said carefully. Left some kind of message. Really? What kind of message? She took a long sip of wine before answering. Just someone playing a prank, I think. Maya thinks it might have been one of the students. I turned a page. Anything valuable missing? No, nothing like that. Just someone going through my things. I could see her watching me, trying to gauge my reaction. Good. Let her wonder. That's weird, I said. You should probably report it to security. Yeah, maybe I will. But we both knew she wouldn't. Can't report a break-in when the only things missing were evidence of your affair. My phone buzzed with a text from Ben. Mission accomplished. Check your email. I excused myself to the garage, where I found that my son had been busy. He compiled a comprehensive dossier on Eric Harrow financial records, employment history, social media posts, even his class schedules and office hours. Kid's got some interesting habits, Ben said, appearing beside me. Check out his credit card statements. Eric had expensive tastes, designer clothes, high-end restaurants, weekend trips to Boston and New York, all on a professor's salary that, according to the university's public records, shouldn't have supported that kind of lifestyle. Trust fund, baby, I muttered, scrolling through the data. Figures. There's more. Look at this. Ben pulled up Eric's social media profiles. The guy was a narcissist's dream, constant selfies, humble brags about his research, photos of expensive meals and exotic vacations. But it was the comments that caught my attention. Multiple women, all young, all former students, all leaving flirty messages that crossed the line between appropriate and carnivory. This guy's a serial cheater, Ben observed. Mom's just the latest conquest. The thought made my blood boil. Bad enough that my wife was having an affair, but to find out she was just another notch on this asshole's belt? That was almost worse than the betrayal itself. Dad? Ben was watching me with concern. You're doing that thing where your jaw twitches. I'm fine. No, you're not. But that's okay. We're going to make them pay for this. I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he grown up? When had he become someone I could count on in a crisis? We? I asked. You think I'm going to let them get away with this, with hurting you, with breaking up our family? Ben's voice was steady, but I could see the anger burning in his eyes. They want to play games? Let's show them how it's done. That evening, Lila got a call from Eric. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but it was enough. What do you mean someone vandalized your car? No, I don't know anything about it. Yes, it's probably just a coincidence. No, we can't meet tonight. Max is acting suspicious. She hung up and turned to find me watching her from the kitchen doorway. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Fine, just work stuff. Eric having car trouble? Her eyes widened slightly. How did you... Lucky guess. Guy drives a BMW, right? Those things are always breaking down. Right, yeah, that's probably it. But I could see the wheels turning in her head, putting pieces together. Good. Let her sweat a little. The next few days passed in tense silence. Lila was jumpy, constantly checking her phone, looking over her shoulder like she expected someone to be watching her. Which, thanks to Ben's technical skills and my own surveillance efforts, someone was. Eric had gotten his car fixed, but the damage to his ego was harder to repair. According to Maya, who had become my unofficial informant, he'd been ranting to anyone who would listen about psychotic spouses and blue-collar vigilantes. The breaking point came on Friday night. I was in the living room watching TV with Ben when Lila came downstairs, dressed to eliminate tight dress, full makeup, the works. Where are you going? I asked. Girls' night out with Sophie, she said, not meeting my eyes. Don't wait up. Sophie was her coworker, a social climbing gossip who enabled Lila's worst impulses. But according to Ben's monitoring of Lila's phone, Sophie wasn't on the agenda tonight. Eric was. Have fun, I said. Say hi to Sophie for me. Lila paused at the door. I will. Tell her I said thanks for covering for you all those times you were working late. My wife's face went white. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, just being polite. She left without another word, but I could see her hands shaking as she closed the door. Following her, Ben asked, Damn right we are. We took my old pickup truck, staying well back as Lila drove across town to the Sunset Motel. It was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions about names on credit cards. Eric's BMW was already in the parking lot. Stay in the truck, I told Ben. But Dad, stay in the truck. I walked across the parking lot, my footsteps echoing in the humid night air. The motel was a relic from the 60s, all cracked concrete and flickering neon signs. Room 237 had a light on, and through the thin curtains, I could see two figures moving around inside. I knocked on the door. "Room service," I called out in a fake accent. "We didn't order—" Eric's voice muffled through the door. "Complimentary champagne for management." The door opened, and Eric stood there in a hotel bathrobe, his hair disheveled and his face flushed. Behind him, I could see Lila sitting on the bed, wrapped in a sheet, her eyes wide with terror. "Hello, Eric," I said conversationally. "Nice place you've got here." "Max, I can explain—" "I bet you can." I pushed past him into the room, taking in the scene. Clothes scattered on the floor, empty wine glasses on the nightstand, the smell of Zex and cheap cologne hanging in the air. Very romantic. Really sets the mood for infidelity. Lila found her voice. "Max, please, just let us—" "Let you what? Finish? Don't worry, I'm not staying long. Just wanted to see what 15 years of marriage was worth these days." Eric stepped between us, trying to look authoritative in his bathrobe. "Look, Max, I know this is difficult, but Lila and I have feelings for each other. Real feelings. We didn't plan for this to happen." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Real feelings? Is that what you call it? Because I've seen your social media, Professor. I know about your other real feelings with your students." His face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." I pulled out my phone and showed him some of the screenshots Ben had compiled. "Recognize any of these girls? They all seem to have had real feelings for you, too." Lila was staring at Eric with growing horror. "Eric, what is he talking about?" "It's not what it looks like," Eric stammered. "Those are just what? Just other women you were screwing while you were screwing my wife?" The room went dead silent. Eric's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Lila pulled the sheet tighter around herself, suddenly looking very small and very young. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Lila, you're going to get dressed and come home with me. We're going to sit down like adults and figure out how to handle this mess without destroying our son's life any more than you already have." "And if I don't?" she asked defiantly. I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Then I release all of this to the university administration, the local newspaper, and every social media platform I can find. Your choice." Eric tried one more time to assert control. "You can't threaten us like this. I'll call the police." "And tell them what? That I caught you in a motel room with my wife? That I have evidence of you sleeping with your students? Please make that call. I'd love to see how that conversation goes." 20 minutes later, Lila was dressed and following me to the parking lot. Eric stayed behind, probably trying to figure out how to salvage his career and his reputation. "You can't do this," Lila said as we reached our cars. "You can't control me like this." "I'm not controlling you," I replied. "I'm giving you a chance to handle this with some dignity. But if you'd rather have this conversation in front of the whole town, that can be arranged too." She got in her car without another word. The drive home was a parade of flashing headlights in my rearview mirror as Lila tailgated me, probably working up the courage for whatever confrontation was coming. Ben was waiting in the kitchen when we arrived, his laptop open and a grim expression on his face. "How much did you hear?" I asked him. "Enough," he said quietly. "I've been monitoring her phone. She's been texting Eric the whole drive home." Lila stormed through the front door like a hurricane, her earlier fear replaced by righteous indignation. "How dare you humiliate me like that? How dare you spy on me? How dare I?" I kept my voice level, but inside I was seething. "You've been cheating on me for months, planning God knows what with your boyfriend, and you're worried about being humiliated?" "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I have the texts, Lila. I have the photos. I have witness statements from half the town who've seen you two together." Ben cleared his throat. "Actually, Dad, there's something else." He turned his laptop screen toward us. On it was a text thread between Lila and Eric from earlier that evening, before she'd left the house. "Eric, we need to accelerate our timeline." Lila, "What do you mean?" Eric, "I mean we need to get Max out of the picture, permanently." Lila, "You're scaring me. What are you talking about?" Eric, "Not literally, but we could make his life difficult. Get him arrested maybe, domestic violence charge, stalking, something like that." Lila, "I don't know." Eric, "Do you want to be with me or not? Because this is what it takes." The room went dead silent. Lila's face had gone white as she read her own words on the screen. "You were going to frame me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You were going to have me arrested on false charges. Max, I never agreed to. You never said no either. Ben was staring at his mother with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. Mom, how could you even consider something like that? I wasn't. I was confused, okay? Eric said things would be easier if I was in jail, I finished. If I was out of the way so you two could play house with my money and my son? Lila started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration, of a plan falling apart, of consequences finally catching up with her. I want a divorce, she said through her tears. I want you out of this house. I want half of everything, and I want full custody of Ben. Ben stood up so fast his chair fell over. Like hell you do. Benjamin, this is between your father and me. No, it's not. You made it about me the moment you decided to cheat on Dad and then try to frame him for domestic violence. You think I'm going to live with you after this? You think I'm going to pretend everything's okay while you parade your boyfriend around? Eric isn't. Eric is a carnivore who sleeps with his students and manipulates married women into destroying their families, and you fell for it. The words hit Lila like physical blows. She looked around the kitchen, at me, at Ben, at the home we'd built together, and I could see the moment she realized she'd lost everything. Fine, she said, her voice cold and hard. You want to play hardball? Let's play hardball. I'll take you for everything you've got, Max. The house, the business, everything. And when I'm done, you'll wish you'd just look the other way. She stormed upstairs, and a few minutes later we heard her on the phone, probably calling Eric or a lawyer, or both. Ben looked at me with worried eyes. Dad, can she do that? Can she really take everything? She can try, I said, but she's forgetting something important. What's that? I smiled, and this time it was a real smile, full of anticipation and dark promise. I'm a lot better at playing dirty than she thinks. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Lila hired a lawyer, some hotshot from Boston who specialized in high-conflict divorces and had a reputation for bleeding husbands dry. She moved into a hotel downtown, probably funded by Eric, and began making demands that would have left me bankrupt and homeless. But she'd underestimated both my resources and my determination. Maya, still my inside source at the university, informed me that Eric was getting nervous. The administration had started asking questions about his relationship with Lila, and rumors were circulating about his history with students. His department head had called him in for a friendly chat about maintaining professional boundaries. Meanwhile, Ben had been busy with his own investigation. The kid had a natural talent for digital forensics that would have impressed the FBI. Dad, you need to see this, he said, calling me into his room where he had 3 monitors running simultaneously. I've been digging deeper into Eric's background. What he'd found was a goldmine. Eric's previous teaching positions, his social media history, financial records that showed a pattern of expensive gifts to young women, and most damning of all, a sealed complaint from his last university involving inappropriate conduct with a graduate student. How did you get access to sealed records? I asked. Ben gave me a look that was part innocent and part mischievous. Let's just say the university's cybersecurity isn't as good as they think it is. Ben, you could get in serious trouble for... So could Eric and Mom. And they started this war. He was right, of course. They had started it. And now it was time to finish it. The plan came together over the next few days. Danny would use her network of gossipy bar patrons to spread carefully selected information about Eric's history. Maya would make sure the right people at the university saw the evidence of his inappropriate relationships, and Ben would document everything, creating an unshakable digital paper trail. But the centerpiece of my revenge would be much more personal. I knew that Eric and Lila were planning to attend the university's annual faculty gala together, their first public appearance as a couple. It was being held at the Grand Ballroom downtown with all the local bigwigs in attendance. The perfect venue for a public humiliation. The night of the gala, I dressed in my best suit and arrived early. I'd called in a few favors with some of my corporate clients, and one of them had gotten me a ticket as a technology consultant to the university. I watched from across the room as Lila and Eric made their entrance. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, probably bought with money from our joint account. Eric was in a tuxedo, playing the part of the distinguished professor. They looked happy, confident, like they'd won. That was about to change. I waited until they were seated at their table, surrounded by Eric's colleagues and their spouses. Then I made my move. "Excuse me," I said, approaching their table with a smile. "Eric Harrow?" I'm Max Bishop. I believe you know my wife. The blood drained from Eric's face. Lila looked like she'd seen a ghost. Max, she whispered, what are you doing here? Just wanted to congratulate you both on your relationship, I said loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear. It's so nice when people find love, even if it's with someone else's spouse. The conversations around us died. People were staring now, sensing drama. Eric tried to salvage the situation. I think there's been some misunderstanding. Oh, no misunderstanding at all, I interrupted. I have plenty of evidence. Text messages, photos, hotel receipts. Would you like me to share them with your colleagues? You wouldn't dare, Lila hissed. Try me. I pulled out a tablet and set it on the table, displaying a slideshow of their affair. Photos from the motel, screenshots of their explicit text messages, credit card records showing Eric's payments for their romantic getaways. The table erupted in shocked murmurs. Eric's department head, a stern woman in her 60s, was staring at the evidence with undisguised disgust. There's more, I continued, advancing to the next slide. Eric's history with his students, the sealed complaint from his previous job, the pattern of carnivory behavior that the university somehow missed during their background check. Eric lunged for the tablet, but I was ready for him. I stepped back and he stumbled, knocking over a glass of wine that splashed across Lila's red dress. You son of a bitch, he snarled, his polished facade finally cracking. You can't do this. Actually, I can. It's all public record now. I've sent copies to the university administration, the local newspaper, and the state education board. By Monday morning, everyone will know exactly what kind of man you are. Lila was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks as she tried to clean wine off her dress. Max, please, you're destroying everything. I'm not destroying anything, I said calmly. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth about what you two destroyed. Security was approaching now, probably called by the hotel staff. Time for the grand finale. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced to the room, I'd like you all to meet Professor Eric Harrow, who specializes in sleeping with his students and married women, and my soon-to-be ex-wife Lila, who specializes in destroying families for men who see her as nothing more than another conquest. The room was in chaos now. People were pulling out their phones, recording everything. Eric was shouting threats about lawsuits. Lila was sobbing uncontrollably. And I was walking away, my head held high, finally free. # epilogue, justice served. 6 months later, I was sitting in my garage workshop, putting the finishing touches on a custom computer build for a new client. The divorce had been finalized the week before. Lila got very little, thanks to the infidelity clause in our prenup, and the evidence of her attempt to frame me. Eric had been fired from the university and was facing multiple investigations. Last I heard, he was working as a substitute teacher in some small town where nobody knew his history. Yet, Ben was thriving. He'd gotten early admission to MIT's computer science program and was spending his senior year of high school taking college-level courses online. The kid had a bright future ahead of him. Lila had moved back in with her parents in another state. She'd tried to reach out a few times, claiming she wanted to work things out and that Eric had manipulated her. I'd blocked her number after the third pathetic voicemail. Maya had been promoted to Assistant Director of Human Resources. She still sent me updates about the fallout from the scandal, which had led to a complete overhaul of the university's policies on faculty conduct. Danny was still running the rusty key, though she'd upgraded the security cameras and started a side business providing information services to suspicious spouses. Turns out there was a real market for her particular skill set. As for me, I was doing better than I had in years. My consulting business was booming, thanks in part to the reputation I'd gained for being thorough and relentless. Word had gotten around that Max Bishop was not someone you wanted to cross. I'd learned something important through all of this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad or getting even. Sometimes it's simply making sure the truth comes to light and letting people face the consequences of their own choices. My phone buzzed with a text from Ben. Dad, just got my final acceptance letter from MIT, full scholarship. Thanks for teaching me that integrity matters more than anything else. I smiled and typed back. Proud of you, son. See you at dinner. Outside, it was starting to rain, but inside my garage, surrounded by the tools of my trade and the satisfaction of a job well done, everything was exactly as it should be. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't always swift, but when it finally arrived, it was worth the wait.